everyone, welcome back to this new video on this channel, Jóvenes Perinando. My name is Anna, and in today's video we are going to be studying chapters 34 through 36 of Genesis. And the title for today's video is Jacob Don't Settle in Canaan, where we're going to see the consequences that Jacob had when he stayed in Shechem for a prolonged period of time. We're also going to see what teaching does this bring into our lives. Before we begin, let's recap what happened in chapter 23 of Genesis, where we find the meeting of these two brothers, Jacob and Esau, after Jacob sent his brother a caravan to appease his anger. After their meeting, we can read that they separated from one another and went their own way. It says in verse 16 that Esau returned his way to from where he came from, and when Jacob returned to Paddan Aram, he went to Shechem and stayed there. And we're going to start off now with the analysis of what consequences was that Jacob received when he was living in Shechem. And the first consequence we find are in verses 1 and 2 of chapter 34. And verse 1 says, "Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had bare to Jacob, went out to see the women of the land." Dinah was the only daughter that Jacob had out of all of his children. Her name can be found in the Strong Dictionary, Hebrews 1783, which means justice, and is the feminine of the name Dan. It can be inferred that this young woman most likely grew up and lived together with her brothers, which caused her to find some friendship with the other women from the city of Shechem. In verse 1, we see that it says, "She went out to see the daughters of the land," meaning that Dinah left the shelter of her home. She lost that part of being at home under the protection of her parents. One comment says that Dinah was not the only one who went to Shechem, but that there were also other women who went with her to the city. With Dinah, the fact that she went out to see shows us that within her heart she already had that desire to see the outside world, to experience and learn more. Most likely, this was because it was not the first time she went out to the city. In verse 2, we are going to see the consequence that Dinah suffered because of going out to sea. It says, verse 2, "And when Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, the prince of the land, saw her, he seized her, and laid with her and humiliated her." So first we can see that Shechem, son of Hamor, saw her, took her, and slept with her out of marriage, humiliated her, and did not treat her decently. Here we can see the first consequence Jacob had because he settled for settling in Shechem. The time that Jacob spent in Shechem without moving from there was enough for his daughter Dinah to begin to have an interest in the outside world and seek to have some friendship with the younger woman of Shechem. Because of this interest, we see that she is dishonored by a Canaanite man who most likely had this custom or influence because of the place and descendants from which he came from. He came from the descendant of Canaan, son of Noah. But this is not the only consequence that there was. In verses 3 to 4, we see that the soul of Shechem, after having dishonored Dinah, had become attached to hers, in such way that he fell in love with her and spoke to his father Hamor and to take Dinah as a wife for him. When Jacob found out what had happened to Dinah, he did not act right away, but he waited for his sons. And when his sons heard about the situation, they were indignant and very angry. And in verses 7 through 12, it says, they said to them, "We cannot do this thing to give our sister to one who is uncircumcised, for that would be a disgrace to us. Only on this condition we will agree with you, that you will become as we are by every male among you being circumcised. Then we will give our daughters to you, and we will take your daughters to ourselves, and we will dwell with you and become one people. But if you will not listen to us and be circumcised, then we will take our daughter and we will be gone." Later in verse 25, we will see the second consequence that Jacob. This is the first consequence that the Shechem and his people had to be circumcised in order for Dinah to be his wife. And in verse 25, we're going to see the second consequence of Jacob. Verses 25 through 27 says, "On the third day, when they were sore, two of the sons of Jacob, Simon and Levi, Dinah's brothers, took their swords and came against the city while it felt secure and killed all the males. They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. The sons of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city, because they had defiled their sister." So we see here, because of the dishonor of Dinah, we see how Simon and Levi arrived at the city of Shechem on the third day after they had been circumcised. And they did this to kill all the men of that city. This to avenge the act that had been committed against their sister Dinah. Jacob, seeing the act of his children, it says that his children have made him stinking before the dweller of the earth. It's very important to remember that these events took place because Jacob had settled in Shechem. Although this moment that occurred with the two brothers against Shechem was allowed by the Eternal to bring judgment to Shechem for what had happened, and because this was perhaps a depraved city that did not please Elohim. Also, we can see that the Eternal tells Jacob that it was time for him to get out of there. This situation that happened with Dinah gives us a very important lesson. Dinah, who was the only daughter of Jacob, represents justice, which remains fragile and is profaned or humiliated by foreign peoples. Because of Jacob having settled in Shechem and not having and because he didn't follow his path, and being justice fragile, it opens the door even more to give rise to the assimilation of sin. We, like Jacob, are pilgrims on this earth, and we are on a path that if we obey and preserve, we will get to obtain those heavenly abodes that the Messiah went to prepare. But what exhortation does this situation of Dinah bring to us? When we, in our pilgrimage, reach a point of comfort and we trust ourselves, thinking that we are firm and that everything is fine in our life, that is, there is no problem in our life and we can settle down for a moment in the world, like Jacob, we can also suffer the consequences of having made that decision. Because just as his children and his servants began to assimilate, we can also fall into it. The scripture says that the adversary is like a roaring lion, looking for someone to devour, and we can find this in 1 Peter 5:8. That is why we should not trust ourselves at any time, since the adversary can very easily and subtly make us fall. If we think that we are well, we can reach this point of comfort where we think it's okay, everything is fine, I can stay here and relax. As young people or believers in general, we are not exempt from falling into such a situation. The same patriarch Jacob, because of having been located in Shechem, had to suffer the consequences of the assimilation that was seen in the town. That's why the scriptures says in 1 Corinthians 10 verse 12, "So, if you think you are standing firm, be careful that you don't fall." Despite being surrounded by the world and all the systems that are within it, we must remain firm in our pilgrimage to not waver. If we stop, settle down, and think we're standing firm, then we can lower our guard and begin to go out into the world and begin to see assimilation, seeking to be the same as the others, and this, little by little, will distance us from the eternal. We do not want to listen or know more about the instruction, so we don't have to put anything into action, despising the word, rejecting it in order not to execute any of its commandments and thus invalidating its covenant. And this is the apostasy that we find in Leviticus 26. It is not necessary for us to go out into the world in order to assimilate. But even within our house, we can reach a state of comfort and allow the assimilation of the world even through our phones or any electronic devices we have. This is why we're always exhorted to stand firm and watch that we don't fall. Because just like Cain, sin is at the door, but we have the option of rejecting it or, on the contrary, accepting it. Going back into Genesis, not only was there assimilation within the people of Israel, but there was also idolatry, as we see in chapter 35, verses 2 to 4, that says, "So Jacob had said to his household and to all who were with him, 'Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let's go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to Elohim, who answered me on the day of my distress, and who has been with me everywhere I have gone.' So they gave Jacob all the foreign gods. They gave Jacob all the foreign gods they had and the rings in their ears, and Jacob buried them under the oak at Shechem." The influence that Shechem had on the sons of Jacob, and not only his sons but also on the people who were with him, was getting bigger, for they began to idolize the gods of the nations that the nations idolized. This is another consequence that Jacob had, since Jacob, being the third patriarch, should have instructed his sons and his servants in who Elohim was, and who Elohim was, who had been guiding him, and whom he had to obey. But because they settled in Shechem, they not only assimilated, but also began to idolize foreign gods, not taking into account that it was only the Almighty whom they had to obey and serve. Today, not only is idolatry found within the religions, but even being believers in the Messiah, we can also fall into a state of idolatry when we prioritize other aspects of our lives other than the eternal. Idolatry also occurs within music, sports, makeup, vanity, fashion, celebrities, friends, family, etc. But the clearest example is materialism. And in Matthew 6, verse 24, it says, "No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both Elohim and the money." We cannot serve two masters, because if we seek to be in good standing with the world or live in the system, we will despise Elohim by rejecting his Torah, and this is how it was with the people of Israel, as they entered into the promised land when they disobeyed and began to form alliances for the nations around them. They not only assimilated, but also fell into idolatry. Therefore, they came to despise the Eternal, since they could not fulfill his commandments while they had other gods. In Judges 2, verses 12 and 13, it says, "They forsook the Eternal, the Elohim of their ancestors, who had brought them out of Egypt. They followed and worshipped various gods of the peoples around them. They aroused the Elohim's anger because they forsook him and served Baal and the Astorites." Satan wants the believer to fall, assimilate, and lose himself in order to devour him. In Genesis 23, we saw that Hamor and Shechem proposed to Jacob and his sons that they should come to an agreement. They would give their daughters for his sons and vice versa, and that they will live with them. And later, when Levi and Simon go to the city, they talk to the men, saying in verses 21 through 23 of chapter 34, we're going to return back to chapter 34, and these verses say, "These men are friendly towards us," they said. "Let them live in our land and trade in it. The land has plenty of room for them. We can marry their daughters and they can marry ours, but the men will agree to live with us as one people, only on the condition that our males are circumcised, as they themselves are. Won't their livestock, their property, and all their animals become ours? So let us agree to their terms, and they will settle among us." As we can see in these verses, Hamor and Shechem were already taking possession of Jacob's cattle, as well as his daughter Dinah, so that they could assimilate into them and thus grow even more powerful. Although the world does not express in such way, we can see a similar process. In order to obtain the same wealth and success as others, it is necessary to give the world our justice that comes from Elohim. And as we begin to live together with the world and its systems, little by little, we are assimilating, and thus our consecration, our service, and dedication to the Eternal become delivered to the world. That is to say, what should be for the Eternal, we deliver it to the world. Now that we have seen how it affected the sons of Jacob and all those who followed him by being located in Shechem, let us see what the Eternal asks Jacob in Genesis 35, verses 1 to 3. And it says, Then Elohim said to Jacob, Go up to Bethel and settle there, and build an altar there to Elohim, who appeared to you when you were fleeing from your brother Esau. So Jacob said to his household and to all who were with him, Get rid of the foreign gods you have with you, and purify yourselves and change your clothes. Then come, let us go up to Bethel, where I will build an altar to Elohim, who answered me on the day of my distress, and who has been with me wherever I have gone. The Eternal, we can see here that the Eternal did not depart from Jacob for having placed himself in Shechem instead of following his path, nor did he depart from him after the slaughter of his sons Simon and Levi. We do not see that there is a claim to Jacob. Instead, he used these events to tell Jacob that it was time for him to get up and go to Bethel so that he could fulfill the vow that the Eternal had made to him. Even when we were in the world and we made mistakes, the Eternal allows us to do teshuvah and return to him, to find the path that we must take through Yeshua. The Eternal did not abandon the people of Israel even when they had fallen into idolatry because of the pagan nations, but gave them a punishment. He exiled them, and he brought back a remnant that was willing to serve in obedience to him. And even until the time of the Messiah, through his surrender, he brought back a remnant within the already corrupted Israel, which not only redeemed the Israelites, but also those who among the nations will seek the Creator. If we say we are believers of the Messiah, let's take this example that we can find within the life of Jacob and his sons to analyze ourselves and see if we are firm in our emunah, or in our faith and service to the Father, or if we are in a comfort zone, gradually assimilating the world around us without realizing it. Because, as it says in James 4:4, you adulterous people, don't you know that friendship with the world means enmity, enemy against Elohim? Therefore, anyone who chooses to be a friend of the world becomes an enemy of Elohim. So, if we want to be friends with the world, then we are going to become enemies of the Eternal. We must analyze them in every aspect of our lives, following the example of Jacob, who told those of his household and those who followed him in verses 2 to 3 to put away the strange gods or the foreign gods that were among them, to purify themselves and change their clothes, and to get up and go up to Bethel to make an altar to the Almighty, who answered him in the day of his trouble, and who has been with him in the way, and who have been with him or guiding him. In short, we must remove the idolatry, all type of idolatry that is still in our lives. In Corinthians 3 verse 5 it says, Put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to you earthly nature, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. Let us be purified and clothed with new spiritual clothing, as it says in Romans 12:2. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what the Eternal's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. Following the path that is Yeshua, who guides us to the eternal, exalting him for the work he is doing in our lives. In John 14, verse 6, it says, Yeshua answered, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Finally, in chapter 36, we see the genealogy of Esau, a biblical character that we have studied previously. And we have seen that Esau was a man who spent more time in the field of the world. That spent more time in the field and in the world. We can also read because he was a good hunter, but he despised his birthright and married women who were not his relatives, with Canaanite women who turned his heart astray. And although he tried to correct the act he had done by taking a daughter of Ishmael, Isaac's brother, Jacob's dad, and Esau's dad, we can see through the history of the people of Israel, we can see that Edom was their enemy who lived apart from the Creator. To conclude, we have analyzed that we as believers must live apart from the world, avoiding at all costs having any friendship with it, because the world is hostile. And if we get to be in a comfort zone, then we can assimilate ourselves and thus fall into idolatry, which only distances us from the Creator. Therefore, if we are believers who serve in spirit and truth, let us do what it says in Revelation 22, verse 11. Let the one who does wrong continue to do wrong. Let the vile person continue to be vile. Let the one who does right continue to do right, and let the holy person continue to be holy. We must continue to strive every day to be able to walk in holiness, separating ourselves from all filth in order to become part of those eternal dwellings. In Matthew 7, verse 13 and 14, Yeshua teaches us, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. And that is all for today's video. Thank you very much for your time. If you like this video, please make sure to give us a thumbs up. And if you have any comments, you can leave them down in the comment section down below. Thank you very much once again, and bye.